Hello, everyone. I'm Mark Dorenkamp with Managing for Profit on Brownfield, a content partnership with Corteva Agriscience. Our guest for this episode is Scott Prignitz, a market development specialist for Corteva. Scott, last week we talked about prepping equipment for herbicide applications. When you're getting ready to head to the field, or maybe in the field ready to spray, what should farmers check to ensure a successful spray of Enlist herbicides?
Well, in addition to those important equipment preparation steps you discussed previously, I'm going to focus on three important considerations as you consider making an application of the Enlist herbicides. The first is wind speed and the potential for temperature inversion. The second is the wind direction. And lastly, the location of susceptible crops and even sensitive areas that could contain special habitat or endangered species. First, let me expand on the susceptible crops. The Enlist herbicides contain a listing of crops that are a little bit more susceptible or could have the potential to be impacted if there was off-target movement. Those crops include cotton, if you're in the cotton growing area, or tomatoes, fruiting vegetables. There's a number of those. Just think kind of the areas of orchards, gardens, greenhouses, or in those geographies that have a lot of specialty crops. It's very important you consider the neighbors. And in some cases, obviously, they may be your own fields if you're involved in the production of a number of crops. But it's very important that you consider where they're located. There are websites that are out there for some states to reference called Field Watch, or there's even state-specific sites that growers of those specialty crops may be able to go in and notify where those are located for the purpose of you referencing it before making that application. And then on the sensitive areas, that's think of that more as wooded areas or maybe non-crop areas that could be potentially downwind. In that case, you would need to leave a buffer. I should specify if they're susceptible crops and the wind is blowing towards those, you absolutely need to stop spraying Enlist herbicides in that situation. When it comes to the sensitive areas where maybe the habitat is involved, there you just need to leave that buffer strip, 30 foot, if the wind is blowing in that direction. And then in addition, I'd like to expand on the wind speed. The ideal wind speed is between 3 and 10 miles per hour. That's kind of a sweet spot, if you will, that we'd like to see most applications. Now, we know in a lot of cases that's not possible. And if the winds do start going a little higher than that, they get up to 15 miles an hour, that's the limit before you would need to discontinue the application of Enlist herbicides. The other side of that spectrum is the 0 to 3 miles per hour. You might think that's an ideal time with very little potential for movement, but it's a time to essentially consider the risk of it as it relates to temperature inversions. And temperature inversions are a way as well that could lead to off-target movement of the herbicides.
Could we expand on temperature inversions then too? What are they?
Well, like the name implies, a lot of people think of temperature, where warm air rises, and yet in the atmosphere, the normal scenario is essentially for the warmest air to be closest to the ground. And since, as the name implies, temperature inversion, it's where the temperature layers are inverted. So in this case, the warmer air is in a layer above cooler air that's at the ground. And what that does is it kind of serves as almost like a lid. And so essentially that warm air that's suspended above the ground is where the spray particles can be trapped. They're not able to get to the ground as you would intend. And therefore the next wind would take those off site in a direction that can be somewhat unpredictable. And, the other part about that is it doesn't matter if it's Enlist herbicides in that case or anything that's in in the application at that point. Most all labels will say do not spray in that situation because of the potential for the off-target movement. The other thing that I wanted to point out was there is a label section as well that talks about the potential for off-target movement through surface runoff. And that was actually added in about 2022 as part of the Endangered Species Act, and it includes some mitigation steps that you should reference the label in that case to see which ones make sense for your operation. And in that case, you can pick some best management practices that fit your operation while minimizing the potential for surface runoff or off target movement in that case.
So for application requirements and best practices for Enlist herbicides, where should farmers go to learn more?
Their local Corteva territory manager is always a great resource. And then there's the websites, the enlist.com and corteva.us are all great sources. There's also a Enlist product use guide that's available online or potentially at their local retailer.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Mark.
I'm Mark Dorenkamp with Managing for Profit on Brownfield, a content partnership with Corteva Agriscience.